am tickled to death, thank you, Dee, to introduce my very favorite Senator Hansen, and we are delighted to have her here. And let me pull up my little introductory thing here. Senator Hansen was elected to represent District 10 in 2017 in a special election. I was the first one to call to volunteer. Senator Hansen currently serves as the chair of the Senate Environment, Environment and Energy Committee and vice chair of the Transportation Committee. She also serves as a member of the Health and Social Services Committee, Elections and Government Affairs, Rules and Ethics Executive and Sunset Committees. She has also founded and serves as the chair of the Energy Stakeholders Group, which is wonderful. If you guys have ever tuned in, it's a place where different points of view get together and talk it out, and it is wonderful rather than the adversarial government thing. Stephanie is known for her work in the opioid epidemic, host of environment, energy, and conservation issues, including the development of community solar legislation. And I'm so tickled with this, making a list of invasive plants that we can go out and kill and helping to support native plants. Senator Hansen has a bachelor's degree in geology from the University of Delaware, a master's degree in earth science from the University of Delaware, and a law degree, cum laude, from Wilmington University, Widener Law School in Wilmington. So without further ado, Stephanie, we are delighted to have you, and I think you and Dee have coordinated with your PowerPoint.
Oh, very good.
I don't know about that, but you do have screen sharing ability.
I do. Yep. I have screen sharing ability. So thank you very much for allowing me to be here today. This year should be really active with a lot of really good environmental legislation. I have a lot of stuff on deck. I'll just give you a quick overview and then we can jump right into the PowerPoint. I know some of the things that we want to talk about are the bills that we did last year, at least one Senate Bill 7 that we did last year, which expanded the state energy office. We'll talk a little bit about freshwater wetlands, which is coming up. It's a bill that I'm going to have this year. And net metering 2.0, kind of do a quick explanation of what that is and where that discussion is right now, because that's kind of like nailing jello to a wall. So I have a bunch of, let me just talk for a second about some environmental bills and some energy bills that are on the horizon. So we're really fortunate in that the Governor's Energy Advisory Council is up and running right now, and it is firing on all cylinders. I mean, there are dozens of people that are part of the 4 subcommittees that are now working to pull together ideas for legislation, and those ideas for legislation are going to churn through that process, make its way up through the Governor's Energy Advisory Council, and I expect that I will be sponsoring a bit of legislation, probably other legislators as well, regarding the energy bills that are going to come through there. The two bills that I really want to work on, and I want to get together, I want one that's going to focus on battery storage and maybe goals for batteries. We are behind the times as far as other states in the United States are concerned. A lot of other states have battery storage goals, which help with resiliency. It helps with, electric bills during the month. There's all sorts of reasons why, we need to be spending more time. We spent like very little time, zero time on batteries so far. So we need to get that. Another is microgrids, which again helps with resiliency, have been shown to be very effective. We actually have one in Delaware right now, which is a smaller one, but there are also some thoughts that we may have some things in our code which is preventing microgrid formation, sort of like how we had some roadblocks in our code with regard to community solar. So we needed to get our community solar bill in place to clear those out of the way. So I want to take a look at what we have with microgrids as well. And we'll talk about net metering too. Environmentally, I have a bill that I've already introduced. I just introduced it last week, so it's in the can and waiting out there. It requires native plants on state properties. So going forward, native plants are to be on state properties, and that means not just DNREC, but DelDOT, Office of Management Budget, all of those. That bill, believe it or not, has taken 3 years to get through the process of getting to a place where the state agencies are happy enough with it. I mean, my goodness, it was a lot because I worked with the Department of Agriculture, with DNREC, OMB, and DelDOT to make sure that they were all okay with the bill. And they seem to be at this point, so that one is already introduced. It's already released. It hasn't been introduced yet, so it's released. Nothing gets introduced until we're back in January. I also have another bill. I call it my Climate Forward Property Owners Act, but I'm going to call it something else, and I don't know what else I'm going to call it yet, but I'll tell you what it's going to do so that maybe you can help me figure out what it's going to be. So this is a collection of so many things that I have heard from constituents that continues to get louder and louder, and I think is something that we need to address. And it has to do with what you're allowed to do on your own property when you live in an HOA that has deed restrictions that don't allow you to do certain things that would be much more climate friendly. So for instance, if you're not allowed to have a clothesline, so you have to have a dryer, which, you know, we want to try and cut back on our energy usage. We need to be able to have things like clotheslines. We need to be able to have, there are deed restrictions that don't allow you to have a garden in many cases. You're not allowed to grow food on your property, which to me, you know, that ain't right. Okay. That just strikes me as wrong on a number of levels. So that's another piece of this particular bill. We'll perhaps address composting. I'm not sure how we might work with that, but perhaps we can. Also, the ability to have native plants and meadows to not be required to maintain turf, that instead to be able to have native plantings on your property, so long as they are manicured and they meet certain guidelines so that they won't be considered tall weeds and grass. You know, so it's that bill that I've started working on now. Like I said, Climate Forward Property Owners Act. Hate the name. I don't know. I got to call it something more than that. Happy for anyone to give me some thoughts on what that could be. Another bill that I'm started working on, you might have seen in the newspaper recently, the Delaware Supreme Court came down on with a decision regarding CROTA. And that had to do with whether people were going to be, whether CROTA was going to be required to start medical monitoring of the people that had been exposed to the ethylene oxide release from around their facility. And the court said, no, they have been exposed. It's a dangerous chemical, but Delaware doesn't recognize medical monitoring as something that's required under our current law, under our current negligence or tort law or something like this. And then they went on to say, you know, that other states do. And if in the future Delaware wanted to look at it, they should look at A, B, C, and D. You know, like when would, you know, is there a statute of limitations? What kind of medical monitoring are we talking about? And what are the elements that you would have to meet in order to be able to make a requirement for medical monitoring? So I've reached out to the Department of Justice and others and have begun doing the background research on what we would need to do, what a bill like that would look like. I think that's a very significant bill. It applies outside of the context of just CROTA. It would apply to, you know, exposure to environmental toxins. So let's figure out what it is that we're talking about here, and get that to a place where I think we can get it passed. So that's going to be a big bill. That'll be a big one. It'll be a heavy lift. I want to get these out as soon as we can when session is back in. So let's see. I don't know that that's going to be a January bill because I think it's probably going to take more background research in order to get that to a place beyond January. But who knows? At least you know that it's out there. Let's see. So with that, I'll go into my PowerPoint. Let me share screen. Okay, are you seeing just the slide?
Yes.
No, we're seeing the software too. So if you could just hit from beginning, that should do it.
Yeah, I did. This is what we have right here. Let me see. I'm out. Can you still see?
Yeah, we can see the frame.
Oh darn. Okay, well let me try this a little differently. Hold on. Maybe I was sharing the wrong screen. Let me go back to share screen. Let me share a different screen. I'll share this one. Screen one. Go back over here from the beginning. How about that?
We don't see anything now.
You don't see anything?
No screen anyway.
Oh,
Just people.
technology. That's terrible. Okay, let me try it. Let me try something else. Well, Dee, how about if I send to you my presentation and then can you share it from your screen?
Sure, or just put the other one back on. We can deal with it. But feel free to send it to me in the meantime. See if one or the other works.
All right, hold on. I apologize, guys.
Oh, it happens.
We're all becoming computer crazy. Gonna say nerds.
All right, Dee, here it
I'm
comes.
Okay.
It's coming
Looking
to
for
you.
I'm looking for it.
It's pretty big, so it might take you a second.
Yeah, that's the thing.
I just got there. This looks like a meditation session.
Did you get it yet, Dee?
No, not yet. Just try it again, Stephanie. See if it can work while I'm waiting.
All right.
See if
We shall do that.
I'll take this opportunity to, our next Green Drinks is October 16th. And Kathy Harrison, who I think some of you guys may know, will be our speaker and talk about the ACC2. So here we go.
All right, how about this?
Good. We still have
see the frame, but at least we see it.
This is good.
You're very kind. Okay, so we will start. green drink. So the first thing we want to talk about are the freshwater wetlands. So freshwater wetlands and I have had a long and storied history since I've been in office since 2017. I actually reached out to DENREC at the time and I said, I think we need to regulate freshwater wetlands at the state level, because what we have right now is just kind of a patchwork where we mostly depend on the federal government to regulate freshwater wetlands in Delaware. The only freshwater wetlands that we actually regulate as a state are those that are 400 contiguous acres. There aren't a lot of freshwater wetlands in the state of Delaware that are 400 contiguous acres. So what that means is that the majority are regulated by the federal government. However, DENREC did not really seem to be particularly interested in doing that. I drafted a bill anyway and introduced it. I think it was in 2020. Yes, Senate Bill 233. And that instituted a statewide non-tidal wetlands program, which immediately got the attention of DENREC and the Department of Ag, who said, whoa, wait a second. No, we can't do that. That's going to be too expensive. It's a mess. There's all this going on at the federal government now. We got all kinds of things going on. You know, we can't do, we don't even know what we would do. And I said, well, how about then if we pass something that says you're going to figure out like what it would take in order for us to do a state freshwater wetlands program. So that's what we did. We wrote Senate Joint Resolution 2 with DENREC, passed that. That passed in 2021, and it required DENREC to engage federal agencies to identify the administrative structure, legal structure, and resource needs to establish a state non-tidal wetlands permitting program, with a report due within a year. So September 30th, 2022. So September 30th, 2022 comes, lo and behold, we have a report. And that report says that wetlands are very important. There, as of 2017, we've got almost 300,000 acres of wetland, making up 25% of our state's land area. Just over half of those are freshwater, and 80% of those are forested. Unfortunately, depending on the current federal definition, and current was before Sackett. Okay, so before this latest Supreme Court decision in Sackett v. EPA, we had about 30,000 acres that were completely outside of the realm of being under the jurisdiction of either the state or the federal government. In addition, you know, wetlands are important. And federal oversight has been historically inconsistent due to their staffing resources and changing jurisdiction. Over the last several decades, DENREC has cataloged and documented the continued loss of regulated and unregulated wetlands across the state for various reasons. And land use decisions, as we all know, at the local level have not stemmed activities in the areas under most demand, despite efforts to increase by voluntary measures conservation and minimize the impacts. Wetlands are still being developed. So state task forces have looked at this issue of the state regulating federal wetlands many times in the past. I don't know, it's almost 5 different times. And all they've been able to come to is there ought to be put in place all these voluntary programs and incentives. And so that's all that we have had, other than the federal, the kind of patchy federal jurisdiction in the state. But it really hasn't done very much. So continue on with what the Senate Joint Resolution 2 report said. Delaware is the only state in the Mid-Atlantic region without a state-level non-tidal wetland regulatory program, which leaves Delaware landowners at the mercy of ever-changing bureaucracy at the federal level and without state autonomy in establishing how wetlands should be protected. So then we go into this issue of multiple legal challenges, things going on at the federal government, particularly with regard to what constitutes waters of the United States. And it says that, you know, wetlands are important, but we're not recommending that we have a state non-tidal wetlands program. And they said, we don't recommend having a state non-tidal wetlands program, even though they're important, even though the jurisdiction at the federal level is ever changing and it's a problem for everyone, because we still don't know what the federal government is going to do, because at the time when they did the SJR2 report, the Sackett decision was still pending. we're going to have to add maybe 12 new people, and it could cost $500,000 in new salaries, only half of which we would be able to make up by permitting, costs or charging people for permits to fund the programs. So we're not recommending that Delaware do a state non-tidal wetlands program, which I found completely awful. I don't see how you can write a report, 95% of which says these are important resources, we are losing them, and then come to the conclusion that we should do nothing or we should wait. So undeterred, this past year, I did a couple of things. One thing that I did was I worked with about a dozen other environmental and community organizations on what's called the statewide freshwater wetlands project, to bring the understanding of freshwater wetlands to a wider audience, and particularly kids in schools, because I wanted to make sure that we're getting to the younger generation and we're bringing them into this whole process as well. So we had a essay contest, an art contest. We had an award ceremony. We had hundreds of students throughout the state that were a part of this, and we declared through Senate Concurrent Resolution 21, June 9th as Freshwater Wetlands Day in Delaware, where we had them all come down to the General Assembly, and we had our art projects all laid out in front of the, in the hallways of the General Assembly, people up on the balcony, people on the floors. It was really good. And I wrote and passed Senate Concurrent Resolution 86, which was something that probably DENREC was not happy with, but it said basically, hey, now that SACIT has passed, why don't you update that SJR2 report? So the SJR2 report is due at the end of September. So it is due September 30th of this year. So that's only in 12 days. It's less than 2 weeks. So what do we think is going to happen in 2024 with freshwater wetlands? I'll tell you what I think is going to happen. I'm bringing back that freshwater wetlands bill, only it's going to have more, it's going to be aligned with whatever comes out of this revised SJR2 report from the department, saying what kind of a program it needs to look like. And then we need to just do it. We need to just do it. I mean, now we have a federal determination from the U.S. Supreme Court that the federal government isn't going to be regulating freshwater wetlands that don't have a direct connection to continuous water. So we'll find out in this report how much that means as far as an impact in Delaware. I know from studies in other states and at the nationwide level, the thought is that's about half of the wetlands. So, we already talked about 300,000 acres of wetlands in the state of Delaware. So maybe half of those, maybe we go from 30,000 being no longer covered under state or federal to 150,000. I don't know. We'll find out from the SJR2 report. But I think we've waited long enough. We need to get this program in place. I don't know if you just recently saw yet another article about the Bethany Beach firefly, the loss of the Bethany Beach firefly. Well, that's a freshwater wetland, okay? The developer was allowed to build over top of it. Now, he didn't destroy it, didn't fill it in, right? Didn't cover it up like that. But what he did was build on top of it. So it blocked off the air circulation, blocks off the sunlight. I mean, it is damaging. And so, there's another of many examples of why freshwater wetlands need state protection. Many of our threatened and endangered species are found in freshwater wetlands. It's a huge water purification system, both groundwater and surface water. They are important for flood control. They're important for all sorts of reasons. And we have to just stop kicking rocks and regulate them at the state level. So next, expanded energy office. So this was a bill I did last year, started off a whole lot bigger. started off with, we're creating the Delaware Energy Administration, because there were a whole lot of things with energy that we needed to do at the state level, and we just were not prepared to do it. Not with the personnel, not with the program direction, all of that. It just needed to be done. As you can imagine, that was not an idea popular with the administration or the governor's office. So we had a lot of discussions, and what we eventually came to is, okay, well, let's start building the program that we have then. Rather than taking a year to create a brand new administration, the Delaware Energy Administration, let's work with the small energy office that we have right now. There were 6 people. This bill would give an additional 5 people, so it just about doubled the size of the state energy office, and expand the duties of the state energy office as well. So we can start building our capacity to do the things that we need to do with the energy transition. Because we can talk about, oh, there's grants available to do this and grants available to do that. But, you know, if we don't even have the personnel in place to take advantage of the money available in the grant, you know, that's why we weren't applying for a lot of those grants. We didn't have the personnel to even to implement them. So the expanded energy office goes from 6 people to 11 people. And I put this picture in here specifically because there's 6 chairs. I counted those chairs. I thought, I want a picture that shows exactly how big the size of and this, I mean, our state energy office is, you think of all the things that we need to be doing with energy, with solar. We've got Peggy talking about wind. We've got EVs. You know, we have hydrogen and emerging technologies, all the grids of all the big things that we need to be doing in energy. And you got 6 people, just the 6 people in those chairs. So at least now we're going to have 11 of them. So you're also expanded the duties of the state energy office. They have to reach out to a broad group of government agencies and other stakeholders, both in-state and regional, because we're behind in a lot of things. And our surrounding states, we can learn from what they have gone through and work with them on regional energy issues. It must recommend legislation or other initiatives to enable the state, utilities, and citizens to secure federal funding to support energy efficiency. So here's all this is the paragraph that says the state energy office needs to help other folks, including utilities and municipalities and others, to get federal grant money, and themselves to get federal grant money, because there's a lot of federal grant money that's out there that's available. So part of the duties is to ferret that out and to help other entities get federal grant money. Must develop and update the state energy plan every 5 years, which is the same as the climate action plan. We wanted to make sure that it was in both of those bills, so that if either one of the bills, either the climate action plan, you know, kind of stumbled like it did the year before and didn't pass, or this one didn't pass, at least both of them together are going to have that same requirement in there. So darned if we're not getting an updated, you know, climate action, energy plan. And then it must serve as a liaison between the state and federal agencies and energy agencies in other regions on energy programs and policy matters set forth in the chapter. Must monitor and act in a coordinating capacity to promote the planning and build out of the state energy grid. You know, we can have all the energy generation in the world, but if you can't get it from point A to point B because you don't have the transmission and distribution, you don't have the grid set up appropriately for it, what good's it going to do you? You know, if it's not going to be able to get to the end user. So this is about working on that very unsexy piece. You all like to talk about renewable energy and the generation of it. The stuff that's not sexy, that is just as important, that we have to spend more time talking about, and now we are, is all the stuff related to the grid and the planning and the build out. Conduct analysis of resource adequacy, has to participate. This is a big part of Senate Bill, kind of works with Senate Bill 170, which is the offshore wind procurement bill. The state energy office must participate in offshore wind transmission planning with the regional transmission organization, which is PJM. We only have one, PJM. the Delaware Public Service Commission, the Division of the Public Advocate, the utilities, other stakeholders, and other states. So here's where it's really the hook for getting us as a state involved in offshore wind transmission planning and the whole offshore wind concept. And by the way, the report due from DNREC on offshore wind as to whether we're going to be jumping into this and doing a procurement process, and all of that is due December 31st of 2023. So it's coming. We'll have it before we start back in session. Next, must conduct analysis, study policy options, and collaborate with energy utilities and other stakeholders to make recommendations to facilitate the responsible siting of renewable energy facilities in Delaware. That is gonna be tough. I hope that there's at least one person on here from Kent County, and if there's not, we need to find them and put them on here from Kent County so that we can talk to them about how important it is that solar energy be allowed in Kent County, that we have places where community solar and utility scale solar can be, because Kent County has really kind of come out not in favor of solar energy, and it's a moratorium on solar energy facilities in a large area in Kent County. So how we're going to cross that bridge, because things are tricky in Delaware, where we like local governments to have local control over local land use decisions. But if it's an issue of statewide concern, that's where we need to have conversations. Clearly, our need to move to renewable energy and have more solar energy in that mix, because we don't have a lot of eggs in that basket as far as renewable energy is concerned. We've got to start talking with our counties. So why the push to plan? This is something that I want to make sure that you've heard about. I've heard a lot about this. We've had a couple of presentations now at the Energy Stakeholders Group about this whole issue. And it might be something that you haven't heard of, but it's important. So recent studies from PJM and other entities, and by the other entities, I mean the federal government, the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission, have highlighted potential reliability issues due to the confluence of three things. The first thing, all these things, there are three things happening at the same time. Number one, the retirement of traditional fossil fuel facilities, such as the NRG facility down at Indian River. And the retirement of those facilities are the result of policies that are kind of moving us away from fossil fuels, but also it's economics. It's just becoming more expensive to run those than it is to run other sorts of use other sorts of fuel. So we have number one, the retirement of fossil fuel. Number two, the increased demand for electricity brought on by the move to electrify our homes, our businesses, and EVs, and the increase in our population. So right on one, we've got going on kind of the powering down of our traditional fossil fuel facilities. We've got an increase in demand with the electrification that we want to do of all the things that we want to electrify at this point. And we have, number three, the inability to bring renewable resources online fast enough due to siting concerns, which is what I just talked to you about, and also interconnection concerns. So interconnection is the ability to get an agreement between a generator and the transmission and distribution company, because poles and wires and substations are of a certain size. They can only handle a certain amount of current through them. So you can't just build and build and build, bringing new generation and just hook it up and expect it's going to go there, because sometimes those lines are jammed. Those are interconnection problems that we need to solve. So we have those two big things to get on top of. So that's the push to plan. That's why there's this big push to increase the size of our state energy office, make sure that our governor's energy advisory council is firing on all cylinders, which it really is now, and it's wonderful. But just be aware that this is a problem. So these three things represent a timing issue, a mismatch of available resources with the demand that we have to plan for now, or we will face reliability issues. We were really close to this problem last Christmas Eve. I don't know if you remember that, but there was a winter storm that went through about December the 22nd through the 24th. And I got a notice from PJM. It wasn't very alarming. I think it was just one of those public service announcements. Hey, it's really cold out there, and it's going to be really cold for a while. So, we're expecting an increase of people using energy. So, keep that in mind and maybe cut down a little bit. And I remember getting that notice on Christmas Eve going, all right, so do you want me to turn my Christmas lights off? Like, how serious is this? Like, tell me how serious this is. Well, turns out after the fact, it was pretty darn serious. It was very serious because the weather got very cold very quickly, and it stayed very cold for a long time. And the generators that PJM had on board that were supposed to generate electricity quickly and on time were falling short. And they were falling short for a number of reasons. The biggest reason being the cold weather began to affect their equipment. And a lot of this was natural gas. The cold weather was affecting their equipment, and they weren't able to deliver it to the amount that they had hoped to be able to deliver it. So we nearly found ourselves in a blackout. We didn't, but we nearly did. And we found out a lot about this. PJM actually did a big presentation for us at the Energy Stakeholders Group as to how it happened, how they're going to try to work to make sure it doesn't happen again. But that's where they brought up this issue of the confluence of three things. They're saying we are treading on ground which is getting shakier and shakier because we have a decrease in these traditional fossil fuel facilities, which, they're reliable. You flip a switch and they're on, we've got a decrease in them. We have the increase in the amount of electricity we want to be using. And we have this intermittency, these problems with getting our renewables online as quickly as we need to. And we're going to have problems like this, like we just faced last Christmas Eve, in the future. And if we don't get on top of it and plan in a good way for that, they're going to get worse, and we are going to have blackouts. So we need to make sure that we're on top of that. That means what that really means is we have to look at the spectrum of what we have available. How much energy do we need for our summer peak, our winter peak, our base load? How much energy do we need throughout the year? Where's it coming from, given the availability of those resources? And what is that reliability look like? So we need to make sure that we've got the right balance going forward, so that when we we flip a switch, the electricity comes on. Lastly, net metering cost shift. So net metering is a situation where if you have solar panels on your roof, a lot of times the financial, like the thought process that you go through about, well, should I put solar panels on my roof, is driven, it's driven by the economics of the situation many times. Well, how much, if I put these panels on my roof, how much will my electric bill be lowered? And it will be lowered because I'm offsetting the energy that I would otherwise take from the grid. And if I have more energy than I can use in my house, more electricity, then I can send that back to the grid and I can get a credit for it. That's what you're seeing here in this particular slide. You're seeing a home with solar panels on it, and it's using the electricity that they get from the solar panels, but they also have excess. So they're sending the excess back to the utility. The issue that we have in Delaware, and that many states have with regard to this, is that we are compensating folks for the retail value of energy that they're sending to the grid. So if you send a kilowatt, 1 kilowatt hour of energy back to the utility, you're getting a credit for a retail credit for a kilowatt hour of energy. So it's like if, you know, if like you've got more apples than you need in your orchard in your backyard, you're going to take them over to Acme and they're going to give you retail for your apples. The reason that was put in place this way, and it was this kind of retail net metering, it's called, is because this was put in place, you know, more than a decade ago when it was very expensive to put solar panels on the roof. And we were trying to encourage people as a public policy to make it more financially viable for them to put these on their roof. And so people started putting them on their roof, which is great. So it worked. Now the price of the solar panels has come down a lot. We're still compensating at retail value. As in the number of people that are actually net metering now and sending energy into the grid is also growing very high. So we've got, I think, almost 7,000 or so households in the state of Delaware right now that net meter. And what happens when you get retail value, when they get retail value for that energy, is that they're not paying for the things that are fixed costs, like the energy, the transmission and distribution poles and wires, the upgrades to those, response when a storm happens and they've got to send the crews out because a line has gone down, that sort of thing. There many times, most electric utilities, and we have 11 of them in the state, by the way, most electric utilities have a customer charge on your bill. So at least in the case, and that pays for some things, it doesn't pay for the entirety of the distribution, transmission and distribution and other costs that are being cost shifted by paying retail for net metering. So the question is, and those costs are then being shifted to everybody else that doesn't net meter. And over time, since most of the folks that have solar panels on their roofs tend to be better off financially, the pool of people is getting smaller that don't have solar panels and generally poorer. So there's this cost shift that's happening. So what we did last year, we passed a bill last year called Senate Bill 298 to try and kind of blunt that cost shift a bit. It doesn't completely take care of the cost shift, but it does blunt it a little bit. And what it does is it makes there are certain programs that are required in the Delaware Code, like the Green Energy Program, the Low Income Assistance Fund. There are certain public purpose societal benefits programs that are required, that utilities are required to pay into, and those we made as non-bypassable. So if you get a credit on your bill, you're still going to have to pay for the societal benefits charges, which according to Delmarva is about $7. It's about $7 on a residential bill a month, if those societal benefits charges. The other thing is, with regard to net metering is looking at your bill on a month-to-month basis. So some months maybe you have more electricity than you use, so you're going to send it to the grid. The next month maybe you need some of that, so some of it comes back. Maybe the next, it goes back and forth at the retail value all year long. So all year long, you're doing back and forth at dollar for dollar retail until you get at the end of your billing cycle, which you can choose. In Delmarva territory, I think in the other territories, they put it at like at the end of March, because that tends to be when things zero out. And then at the end of that annualized billing period, whatever is left on there then reverts back to the utility. Most people that net meter, there is nothing that there's nothing left at the end of the year, or it's very minor. There was a handful of folks there that was not the case, and so perhaps they can, you know, the utility and the public advocate and the SEU will help with aggregating your meters and choosing the right date that would be best for you with those billing. But, you know, that was a way to try and blunt some of the cost shift. And then the utilities use those credits or any of the money that comes back to them to buy energy at wholesale. But it didn't do the whole job. We know that bought us a couple of years, but we need to figure out this bigger issue of what is a final net metering structure that we need to have in place. So that is what a subcommittee of the Energy Stakeholders Group has been looking at really since about this, since we passed 298. At first, there was a lot of discussion as to, well, maybe we should just see if we could come to a minimum bill that solar customers would pay. But I think the more that we talk about it, there hasn't been a clear consensus on what we need to do. I'm beginning to think what we really need to do is a cost benefit analysis to find out exactly, even if it's on a utility by utility basis, how much of a cost shift are we still looking at? Because some of the utilities are beginning to make fixes now. Like we just heard that the utilities under DMEC, which are our municipal utilities, there's about 8 of them or so, are already beginning now to shift some of those, what would have been retail costs to more of a fixed customer charge for that distribution and transmission charge. So they're going to, a de facto minimum bill. So it may be that there isn't a cost shift there anymore, but we just need to know. I think before we monkey around more with electric billing, that we just need to get a handle on the bigger question of how much of a cost shift are we still dealing with, given that we put Senate Bill 298 in place, and we did make some tweaks to cost shifting at that point. What is left? And so that's what we're discussing right now. You'll see legislation one way or the other. The legislation will either be, hey, here's the minimum bill, which I kind of doubt. I'm starting to think, I don't know that that's going to be what we're doing. Or here's a resolution requiring the sustainable energy utility to do a benefit cost analysis. So, which is going to take a year, and it's going to be expensive, and it's a whole big thing. But I just think we're going to need to do the analysis ahead of time. Still in the thought process, though. If you want to be a part of that group, if anyone here wants to be a part of that discussion, please just send me an email. I will make sure that you get a link to the Energy Stakeholders Group meetings. We talk about net metering 2.0 and what we're doing with this and our survey and all of that at nearly every meeting. And you are welcome to participate and give your thoughts. And I'll send you all the documents that we have too. So that's what I have. Thank you for entertaining me in my long discussion. I'll stop screen sharing. How about that? Okay.
Jill, you're muted if you're.
Stephanie, how long do we have you? You have another meeting coming up?
The other meeting started at 7, but I'm not the speaker right off the bat. So I figure if I could get there by like 7:15, 7:20, they shouldn't be too mad at me. It's another Zoom, so I'm just going to hop off from this and hop onto that one.
Okay, cool. Do we have some questions, Renee? I see your hand coming up.
I have a question. Do you know the status of how many school districts in the state have applied for the grant, the federal grant money that was given to the state for solar installations?
I don't, and I don't know. The Drew Slater from the Sustainable Energy Utility may. So if you will go to the Delaware Sustainable Energy Utility website and you can ask that question, and I think he'll be able to help you.
That'd be great. I went to a school board meeting in Brandywine 100 and it was like, everybody was like, oh, well, we got other things to do. And I was like, what? Free
Yeah.
money?
That's actually grants through the Sustainable Energy Utility.
Yeah, it was just like, right, that came from the federal government, right? Thank you.
I'll just call on people. Leslie, you want to unmute and ask your question, Leslie Purcell?
Yeah, hi. That was wonderful presentation. Thank you for all your work. One of my issues is solar arrays. They have so many parking lots. I went to UD Board of Regents, you know, Star Campus has all these parking lots. We got a lot of flat roofs or close, you know, a lot of industrial commercial sites where we could have solar panels, solar arrays and be producing our own energy and shade for parking. So what is the state actually doing to promote that in some of these spaces?
Again, that is a Delaware Sustainable Energy Utility kind of area of expertise, but you are saying just what we have been saying all along as well. And one of the things that I have been asking, and I don't know if we have this at this point, is do we offer, we are marketing to people that there are grants available through the SEU to assist them with those installations. I just don't know if anyone's taking advantage of that. So we have grants available to do that.
So we need a campaign to encourage that somehow.
Yeah, they just find it easier to, you know, it's for the same reason that people, you know, developers build homes on green fields. They find it easier to do that. It's more expensive to build a solar array on a building or a parking lot than it is to build it out in the middle of a farm field. And that's a problem. So that there is grant money available through the SEU to assist with building them in areas where we want them built. We just have to convince people that this is really something that we want them to do.
Who's next? Sally Butner, you want to unmute?
Yeah, thanks so much, Senator Hansen. And I certainly agree on the cost shifting issues with regard to solar panels. Full disclosure, I have solar panels on my own house. But I do hope that, and I'm going to send you a note to I'd love to join that subcommittee. I hope that the panels are producing generally electricity when it's more valuable than the electricity that somebody's using like me right now when it's dark. And I hope that somehow that can be factored in. I know some other jurisdictions have looked at that.
Time of use rates. Yep, we are discussing that. It's called a time of use rate.
Thanks.
Peggy, you want to unmute and ask a question?
Did you say Peggy?
Yes, I did. Sorry. Peggy, yes. Peggy.
Thank you. My hearing is so bad. Senator Hansen, we appreciate the wonderful work you've done for offshore wind in the past. And given that one offshore wind project of 800 megawatts will supply 28% of Delaware's electricity, given that there would be untold health benefits from it, given that there would be a great economic benefit from the ancillary services that would locate in Delaware because of it. And given that we have a really finite number of lease areas that will be coming up, what do you think is the potential for moving forward? And what kind of information will you require from the DENREC report at the end of the year to go forward with offshore wind?
Well, I'd like for them to say in the report that they think this is a direction that we ought to be going. You know, that it has been radio silence on the big question as to whether or not offshore wind is something that we should be pursuing. You might remember the last time the state looked at this, which was 2018, they said no. You know, there was a group, the offshore wind working group that was put together, said no, it's too expensive, it's not for us, no. And it was a, you know, it didn't come to be the easiest thing to even get the state to agree to go into a contract with the SIOW to look at it again, to do another look at it. So the hope is that with the report that's coming at the end of this year, that it actually comes out and says, yeah, we should be looking into offshore wind and getting a procurement process in place. I did also just sign off on a letter. I think that the Mid-Atlantic Renewable Energy Coalition may have put this together to BOEM, asking them to increase their areas where they're looking for offshore.
Perfect.
So
Okay.
I am a fan. I'm also a realist too. We got to make sure that the governor's office and DENREC aren't fighting on this. If they're fighting this move, the likelihood of getting legislation passed is not going to be so great. So hopefully what we'll find out at the end of this year is that they will be with us on this.
Thank you. Thank you. Let me hang on, Renee. Let me ask Claire. I think, I'm not sure who was next, but anyway, Claire, you want to unmute?
Yes, thank you. Although I think, Tom, you had your hand up longer. Go ahead. Then I'll make my comments after you.
All right, thanks, Claire.
Sorry, Tom, you're on.
I'll take you up on that. Thank you, Senator Hansen. I had participated in a few of your stakeholder meetings, and I really appreciate the professionalism and energy that you put into those, and it's apparent in what you've presented today. So thank you for that. I installed solar panels on our home a couple of years ago, and the whole issue really that I had with SB 298 and what it sounds like going forward is the cost shifting. To me, just seems like guaranteeing the large industries a profit. Those industries, DENREC, for instance, who should have been making investments and decades ago, so that we wouldn't find our issues in generating and transmitting energy that are interfering with our ability to meet our goals of renewable energy. So I really have a problem with that concept of cost shifting just being guaranteeing profit to these large multinational companies. I made, as a percent of my much larger percentage investment in renewable energy than these companies did. And so for them to shift the cost to me, I feel is unfair, and to others who are in the same position. And I would hope at the very least there could be some grandfathering considerations. My considerations, I was at best break into it, understanding it, but I did it for the purpose of doing the right thing and helping our climate. And to hear that I may endure the cost, more cost, while the are not, is disheartening to me.
Yeah, grandfathering is definitely something that is on the table. And as far as I'm concerned, it needs to be a part of any net metering change that we have going forward. The only question in my mind is grandfathering for how long? Are we talking grandfathering for 5 years, 10 years, 15 years? How does that fit into the whole equation? So, but with the other, guaranteeing them a profit, the utilities have a guaranteed right of return that is monitored by the Public Service Commission and the Public Advocate. In fact, they're the only utility that actually falls under the jurisdiction of the Public Advocate and the Public Service Commission. And it's specifically to keep an eye on what is that rate of return. You're not going to, and that's why we have the Public Advocate and the Public Service Commission in the energy stakeholders group that have been putting together the legislation, because it's their job to watch that, to make sure that, that they're operating within a realm of fairness. So, I mean, that's the best that we can say. But again, that goes back to, I think we just need our cost benefit survey at this point. We're just going to need to bite the bullet, pay the cost, to have an in-depth, cost benefit analysis done as to how much of the cost shift still exists. And it will have to be on a utility by utility, separate utility basis, because they're all different.
Okay, thank you.
Stephanie, do you have time for one
Sure.
more question from Claire?
Sure.
Sure, thank you. And I do appreciate you being such an environmental champion, and it was just energizing to hear all of this. I have actually just two quick comments, one to each part. As far as the freshwater wetlands, in addition to all those wonderful things that you were looking at and talking about, some consideration when you brought up the Bethany Beach Firefly and that development is looking at what's already been promised for development and potentially some sort of retroactive adjustment, because that one had been promised for development, and that's why Sussex County said they couldn't change anything because it had been given to development. So exactly how much of these freshwater are already under some sort of development plan would be very interesting to study and to see. And then in addition to that is some sort of stronger enforcement. Right now, they just say, oh, you did that and you might pay a small fine, but those trees that you took down, those wetlands, that'll be 25, 30 years worth of protection from nature that we don't have. And so some sort of stronger reinforcement of those obligations. And then as far as the idea for impetus, those three things are critically important, but I like to suggest there's a fourth thing, and that is severe weather situations, which have been on the increase, which also have been majorly impacting the grid and our ability to be resilient and what happens and whether or not we're actually being prepared. So that's what I wanted to say. Thank you so much.
Thank you. I agree with all your comments. Absolutely.
Stephanie, to say what Claire said, Senator Hansen, I should say, thank you for being such a wonderful, wonderful environmental advocate, activist, senator, and mover and shaker in the state of Delaware. We are far better for you. And thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you. You want to say something real quick about your Oyster Fest coming up?
Oh, yes, I have a fundraiser coming, a campaign fundraiser, and I wanted to make it at a small dollar level so that anybody could come that wanted to come. So it's $25, and I'm really focusing on Delaware's aquaculture and our aquaculture industry. We used to have a great aquaculture industry here in the state of Delaware, and then it kind of just hit the bottom. Now, again, just like with energy, we're behind our other states when it comes to things like a hatchery and our aquaculture industry. So we do have a small hatchery that is enlarging down in the Lewis area. Delaware Sea Grant has had a lot to do with that. I helped them get some funding this last year through the budget and the bond bill, because I'm a huge fan of aquaculture. Because I'm a huge fan because it is like a triple win. Oysters clean the water, they serve as a food source, and it's a job creator. So we bring these three things back. I just think that it's a win-win. So I want to do what I can to support the industry. And so at my oyster fundraiser, we're going to have some folks from the Delaware aquaculture industry come up with some oysters. We want to have a couple of different kinds, so you can try one kind versus another kind. We're going to have a presentation on the hatchery and what's being done with Delaware aquaculture and what they're doing at the hatchery, how they hope to grow it. And we're going to have some other seafood as well. I think I'm working with the restaurant on what that might look like. But so that's the idea. And it's going to be on November the 14th. It's 5:30 to 7:30. And it is at, there's a development in my district called the Estates at St. Anne's, which is in Middletown. And there's a restaurant and clubhouse in the midst of the estate at St. Anne's. And so that's where this is going to be. If I tell you the name of the restaurant, you'll never find it. It's a weird name. It's just opened up. I swear, why they think a name, let me tell you what it is. Lore Woodfire. Lore, Lore, Woodfire, same one word, WOODFYRE. Now, who in God's name would want to name I don't know. but that's what it's called. All you need to know is it's the restaurant and the only restaurant that's in the estate at St. Anne's, which is a huge development in Middletown. Or look up Lower Woodfire. I put Lower Woodfire on the flyer too, but good Lord. Why
Well,
didn't they just call it? We should just call it the restaurant at St. Anne's. If they'd have called it the restaurant at St. Anne's, everybody would know what they're talking about. This way, you're like the Lower Woodfire. Is that even a restaurant? I mean, Lower? What?
Yeah.
Oh, let
Try-
those
try to be-
creative chefs do their thing. Come on.
Yes. I don't want you to be late for your meeting, Senator Hansen. Thank you, thank you, thank you. And I think we're all going to be coming to your oyster festival. I'll call it your aquaculture. You keep on keeping on. Anything this group of people could do to support environment and you and native plants and all that kind of good stuff is just absolutely wonderful. So we can't thank you enough. I'm going to make my other comment about our next upcoming green drinks, but if you want to check out and hop back on your other meeting, thank you. You are wonderful.
All
Delaware,
Thank you, Senator.
so
Thank
lucky to have you.
Thank you all very much. You have a great night.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Wow. Isn't
Can we clone
Delaware-
her? Can we clone her to
Oh my
SB
gosh, yes.
20?
Yeah,
Please.
yeah. So that is that
There will be cloning charges though. No.
Yeah.
Just so you
Those I
know.
would gladly pay.
Absolutely, absolutely. I just wanted to say again that on October the 16th, Kathy Harris, who leads the Clean Water portfolio at NRDC, I'll get it, Natural Resources Defense Council, will be our speaker, and she will be talking about electric vehicles rebate program and also the Advanced Clean Car Initiative, which we should be hearing sometime in Delaware, what the governor and DNREC have decided to do about that. Do you have any ear to the ground about that?
No, not really. Sorry.
Yeah, yeah. And apparently Kathy also worked for DNREC for the Division of Climate, Coastal and Energy. So I came upon her because I was doing something with her mother who lives in my neighborhood. So Rita, we were talking about how small Delaware is. So that is how I came to her. But I think that the Sierra Club and the ACC2 people are well aware of her. So I'm just catching on. Does anybody have any announcements about programs that are coming up? Peggy, you talked about tomorrow night's offshore wind and the economic development. Anybody else have any programs that are coming up we need to know about?
Yeah, Jill, if I may.
Yes.
Work for US Wind. Our chief regulator, BOEM, the Bureau of Ocean Energy Management, is about halfway through their environmental and technical review of our project permits. And they're going to come out with their draft environmental impact statement in early October. That'll be the initial indication any of us will have on what they're thinking about how we are meeting or exceeding the environmental requirements and what they think about the project. There will be a series of public hearings 20 to 30 days from then. So probably in the end of October, beginning of November. One will be in Delaware. We don't know where yet. A couple will be online. And when I find out about this, I'll push that information out to Jill and Dee. And I would encourage all of you to participate. You can get a lot of great information. You can ask questions. And of course, if you're supportive of offshore wind, it's great for BOEM to be able to hear from folks that are pro the issue as well.
Thank you. I think you are speaking to many people who have testified and asked questions and done all that good stuff. And Dee, did you just put something in the chat? You want to just say that
I
out
just
loud?
put Plastic Free Delaware has a bunch of events coming up, so I just put the link in there if everyone wants to check it out and join us maybe at one or more of them.
Okay, you talked about the food. Oh. Oh, cool. Thank you. I'll have to pay a little more attention to that. Sorry, Dee. Anybody else have anything going on that we need to know about church activities from the Presbyterians and the? Okay. So that, I think that's a wrap, as they say in the film industry. Keep on keeping on, guys. We have a wonderful leader in Stephanie, and lots of people here are leaders and doing all sorts of good stuff. So we will reconvene on October the 16th. Back to our regular time. All righty. Thank you all for
Bye.
joining.
Good night, everybody.
Good night.
Good night.
Thank you.